What does Truman Capote, Castle Publishing, ALSA, and the 400 have in common? So I have no way of proving this, but based on some of the things going on this season, especially in the last episode and this one, I think somebody may have been watching my recaps last season. Hey everyone, this is D, Movieman, fellow cinephile, popcorn addict, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. And today, of course, I'm coming to you all with another episode of the Gilded Age, Season 3, Episode 7, Excommunicated. This episode is directed by Sally Richardson Whitfield, who also directed several episodes of Season 1 and has also been an executive producer for the series. I am so happy to see her back on board. And naturally, this episode was also written by Julian Fellows and Sonia Warfield. So, really quickly, let me just address the elephant in the room. It has been a minute since the last recap and this one. But that is because the last couple of months, I have been enjoying some really unexpected successes and opportunities. I mean, not just in my professional day-to-day job, which I've been really excited about, but some things in relation to YouTube, but as a result of YouTube has come about. And I just honestly can't believe the season that I'm in. I don't think everyone knows about what my journey has been on YouTube and even just the headspace I was in when I started YouTube. And so as someone who has had to deal with a lot of mental and emotional upheaval throughout the years and using YouTube as somewhat of an outlet for that, but also as a way of trying to remain sane and, hold on to sanity and normalcy, just seeing where I am now and seeing that there is this season of abundance that's happening, it's really a lot to take in, and I'm very grateful. But as a result of that, the timing was unexpected, and considering that the Gilded Age came right in the midst of that time, as we got to the end, it was just like, well, I really enjoy the series, but I really got to strike while the iron is hot. And I feel like I've really been making the most of those opportunities, and I am genuinely proud of myself. I'm really excited for where I am. And I think I may just have to do a separate video so I can get into that. Obviously, that's not what we're here for. And as far as those who are still here, I appreciate the views. I'm sure most of you have moved on, and that's fine. But as for myself, I am a completionist, so I am definitely going to finish what I start, but absolutely had to make the most of the time I was given, and I felt like I did that. And so now it is time to bring one of my favorite series to a close, and we are going to do that, of course, with me sharing my thoughts on episode 7. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we begin this episode by seeing a very shocking development. Although I will say, in theory, it wasn't shocking to me because I already knew about it. I did not know it was going to be happening this soon. Because chronologically, this is a few years from now. So I was just like, oh, we're doing this. Okay. So, Mr. McAllister has decided to spill the teacup, of course, regarding his society friends. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but yes, his associates, his social circles as a part of high society. He's decided, hey, let me just put y'all on blast real quick. Why not? I was just like, wow. But what was also really interesting to me is that as someone who read the novel Capote's Women by Lawrence Leamer, which was an excellent novel, by the way, I highly recommend it. It's wild to think that 80 years or 8 decades prior to that, this is something that happened. So that's so wild to think about how history repeats itself and in such a specific, similar way. But yeah, Mr. McAllister has decided to throw all caution to the wind. And let's just say that Mrs. Astor and her circle are not happy about it. And as a result of that, we see Mrs. Astor holding a meeting at Agnes's home, where she is met with Agnes, Mrs. Fish, and Bertha to discuss their next steps regarding this scandal. Mrs. Fish, of course, is very salty because she does not appreciate the fact that her husband's rather cheaper taste when it comes to wine has been put on blast, although Agnes doesn't seem to entirely disagree. But outside of that, they realize, you know what? It's time to excommunicate this man, and as Mrs. Fish says herself, they have their marching orders. And that, of course, means that he will not be invited to Mrs. Astor's end-of-year ball in Newport. And naturally, downstairs, Armstrong is quite enthralled with this book, and she's here for the mess, although there are a couple of things regarding Oscar that she's not quite clear on. And the fallout for McAllister is pretty swift. His name has disappeared from all the exclusive lists he once was at the top of. Mrs. Astor is refusing to see him. The other ladies don't want to have anything to do with him, so he's at a loss, although I don't really understand why. But okay. Mrs. Astor is over it. It's like she already is dealing with this whole situation with her daughter that has now been further put on blast. Her business has been put on blast. Her friend's business. High society is, crumbling before their very eyes. And so she's like, you know what? This ball, I'm going to have to call it off. It's too much going on. Can't do it. Bertha disagrees with her. She feels that the ball should continue to send a message to the naysayers. But when Bertha leaves Mrs. Astor's home, she makes it a point to ignore Mr. McAllister as he attempts to get her attention. But ultimately, Mr. McAllister is not taking the situation lying down, and that is evidenced when he chooses to barge into Mrs. Astor's home, completely ignoring the doorman, trying to keep him out, and he's not coming in like apologetically and saying like, oh, I'm so sorry. No, that is not the energy he's given today. He makes it clear to her that everything that they know when it comes to New York upper crust society is because of him. He says, I am society. I created this. He is the one who introduced European refinement, decor, and fashion to a relatively unrefined American society. It was also his idea to create the exclusive 400, as in the most exclusive, most important people in New York society. He single-handedly brought that forth and helped establish the framework for the society. So as he says, this is all because of him, but he takes it a step further and makes it clear that before Mrs. Astor met him, she was just a sad rich lady whose husband preferred the company of showgirls. Damn! So I don't know if the goal here was just to make a final standoff or what, because I'm like, clearly she's not going to be like, oh, you're right, let's be friends. Like, I mean, make your point, say what you have to say, but clearly we are burning the bridge. And considering Mrs. Astor's reaction, she's absolutely fine with that. She's like, this is the end of the road. We're good. You're done. Finito. It's a wrap. However, things do go a little bit more smoothly when he speaks to Bertha later, and he is trying to explain to her that his goal was just to make it clear that this society full of important, influential, upper crust people, they're just like everybody else. But much like Icarus in the Greek myth, he flew far too close to the sun. Bertha also mentions to Mr. McAllister that because Mrs. Astor's attempts to cancel the ball were met with a lot of complaints, she has decided to allow Bertha to host the ball on her own. And of course, Bertha can't hide her glee and excitement. But obviously, if anybody's going to make the most of that opportunity, it's going to be Bertha. And with this new responsibility in place, her goal is now to end the ban on divorced women. However, things are much more precarious regarding her own household because she and George, they are still at odds. And Larry ain't too happy with her either. George is not concerned about McAllister's book or balls or society. He just knows that business is worse than it's ever been. And that's his number one priority right now. Of course, Bertha is trying to show up with the family, including Gladys and Hector, as a united front to stave off some of the rumors that's been going on. But again, George has bigger things to worry about, and Larry is also not happy because he believes that this whole thing with Marian is somehow the result of her intervention. And I was just like, listen, I understand some of what they were saying, because they were saying, like, you always think about yourself, you never think about what we want. They're saying how they're going to stay at the Union Club away from her. And okay, I get it. Bertha has kind of dug her own grave on this one, okay? However, what I don't like, and that's not just on this show, in life, in any situation, at some point you need to own your mess and you need to own what you've done wrong. So my thing is, the whole thing with George and his business, that's your fault, okay? And the whole thing with Larry and Marian, that's your fault. You played games with Clay. You played games lying to Marian. That has nothing to do with her. Bertha may have her stuff, but so do you all. And I don't like hypocrisy. So being able to say, like, oh, we can't take you, we can't. Okay, well, we can't take you either, because you're a liar and you're horrible when it comes to being loyal in business. So boo-hoo, too bad, so sad. Good night. But speaking of Gladys and Hector, things are going much, much more smoothly for them as a married couple. And that is evident because Hector is clearly getting into a comfortable space with Gladys. There are things he's noticing about, the clothes she wears and her interests and things like that. And despite Lady Sarah's protest, and despite the protest of Lady Sarah, we get to a point where Hector makes it clear to her that it's time to head to London. You need to find your own house, your own space. You're not running the show over here. It's time to cut the cord. Bon voyage. And regarding the whole gossip column situation, Mrs. Bruce, Borden, and Church plant a fake rumor to expose the culprit. And it does end up being Miss Andre. Money is money. She needed some more. She figured, why not? Well, sure, but as of now, it looks like she'll be headed to the unemployment office. Well, actually, considering that the whole unemployment situation and Social Security, all of that didn't come until 50 years later, I guess she'll just be hitting the streets because, yeah. Unfortunately, there is no unemployment office. Jumping over to Oscar, we see a very interesting development there. Now that John has passed, we see him meeting with John's sister, Nancy. And because she knows the situation at hand, she makes it clear to him that she's aware of the relationship and that John had basically set it up for Oscar to receive his summer home free of charge. He just owns it now. And this leads to a very interesting moment where we see Oscar and Agnes and Ada and Marian. They have this very interesting emotional showdown with Oscar because Agnes is kind of unclear as to why he's been gifted this home. It's Livingston Manor, which of course, is connected to her family. And so she's kind of wondering, like, is it because of that? Because otherwise I don't get it. And at this point, Oscar has a meltdown. He's saying, I'm sure you don't want to know how much I miss him. And then, he's basically saying it without saying it. He's crying, he's screaming, and, she doesn't understand what's going on. He's like, do you really want to know? Do you really want to know? And whether she really knew or not before this point is kind of clear, even though Marian takes Oscar, away. Yeah, I think she is slowly but surely picking up what Oscar sort of put down. And considering how tumultuous and kind of like, contentious the relationship was between Marian and Oscar before, it's good to see that they've gotten into a good space because she's there for him. He appreciates it. He's obviously emotionally overtaxed. He figures, she would just, throw him away and look away from him. But she's like, no, look, I don't understand the ins and outs of this, but I do know you're my cousin and I'm here for you. So at the very least, despite the shenanigans and the upheaval of everything that's going on, Oscar knows that somebody, at least, understands him and has his back. Naturally, that same support is not going to be extended to Larry because he comes home to find out about the ring being returned, about the letter. Ada's letting him know, like, look, she doesn't want to see you. Sorry, you're just going to have to deal with it for the time being. But of course, rather than wait, we see Larry showing up at the school where Marian works. And she just lays it all out on the table. She's like, you were not at Delmonico's. You were basically at a house of ill repute. And you lied. And Larry admits that he did lie, but only because he didn't want to basically see the reaction she's having now. And it's just like, yeah, I understand that, but lying, my mother told me at a very young age. Like, lying is the worst thing you can do. I mean, clearly there are worse things, but basically, she told me the same thing my grandmother and her grandmother told her, which is, look, if you lie, you'll cheat. If you cheat, you'll steal. If you steal, you'll kill. Like, it goes on. I understand it's not as literal, but basically it's just like, once you get to a point where you're willing to just not be an honest, genuine person, it just kind of opens the door for you to continue, to let other things in. It's like, okay, well, I can lie. Well, then maybe I can do this. Or then maybe I can, and like I said, it is more complicated than that, but I do understand that. And I do make it a point to be very, very honest, even when I don't want to. I'll be honest, like when I really don't want to. But in this case, when you lie to somebody, there's no trust there, because then the person has to question everything you've ever said. It's just like, if you tell one lie, who's to say you won't tell another, and then you have to tell more lies to cover up the last lie. So, yes. So, as of now, Marian ain't with it. The engagement is still off. However, Jack does make it clear to Marian that he was with him all night and that nothing untoward happened. And that, yes, even though he did lie, nothing else happened. But like I said, the trust has been broken. So trying to put this back together, it's not going to be easy. We also see Marian sitting in on the suffrage meeting that is being held at the Van Ryn household, where Frances Ellen Watkins Harper is the guest speaker. Mind you, this happened because the school where they were going to hold this event, well, the husband who was going to sponsor it got cold feet when he understood more about the subject matter. Ada stepped in and all is well. Unlike Temperance, Agnes is all for women's suffrage. However, she is not really feeling the representative from the New York Heritage Society because she knows that this woman is begging her for money that she no longer has. Now, while I'm sure that Peggy is relieved that Elizabeth Kirkland hasn't showed up to this meeting, Elizabeth Kirkland is elsewhere, creating some unfortunate chaos. We see her meeting with her friend Ernestine, played by the Leslie Uggams, and it's from Ernestine that she learns some rather salacious gossip about Peggy's past. This, of course, calls into question the funeral she attended for her son and why the son would be up for adoption and, why was the child put up for adoption if she was married and was she married? And of course, Elizabeth has now been given the perfect ammunition to strike at Peggy. She, of course, wastes no time spilling the beans to William. William is shocked, but he has to hear that from Peggy himself. So he's not just taking what she says at face value, but considering that it's something she didn't mention to him, this might be a little bit of a mess. And I don't know if this is something that they're going to be able to overcome. Do the right thing, William, please! And circling back around to George, remember I said that a lot of the situation began or has gotten to this point as a result of his backstabbing, right? Well, let's just say that there's been a little bit of a domino effect as a result of that. Now, what's great is that the reveal of the copper mines as a result of Larry's intervention means that George now has the leverage to get his business back on track, literally and figuratively, because he now has the capital to buy enough of the Merrick shares to take control of the Illinois Central Line. George has no problem telling Mr. Sage and Clay that he has come out on top. Sage is not pleased. He tells Clay, okay, what do I need you for? Hit them bricks. He fires him. And once again, Clay is out there on the streets. George, of course, is delighting in Clay's downfall, but Clay makes it clear that he is like a cockroach. And considering that cockroaches can survive up to a week without their heads, I think Clay knows what he's talking about. Unfortunately, it does not take long for us to see the evidence of this statement. George is at the office. He receives a delivery. But this is a very special delivery. Out of nowhere, the delivery man suddenly turns into a gunman and shoots the secretary next to him. And then he immediately turns the gun towards George and pulls the trigger. I know they say life comes at you fast, but this was a little faster than I was expecting. And that closes out episode 7, Excommunicated. Look, let me just say this. What I said at the beginning of this video, my intro, somebody was listening to my last recap, because I literally said in my, my final wrap up of the finale and just some of my thoughts as far as a review, pros and cons, I said that we kind of have to get deeper into the stakes. Like, we have stakes, but they're a little too low stakes. We got to amp it up a little bit. I said that. And now somebody must have really taken heed to that. I don't know who, but somebody, because we got John, we have, Elizabeth, Kirkland, this whole thing with Peggy. We have George, and this gunman, Clay, we got Larry lying to Marian. I mean, mess on top of mess. I'm here for the mess. But whew, what a mess. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. So let me just go ahead and slide on into the next recording so I can get into this finale and officially close this thing out. But again, I appreciate all the support. I appreciate the patience. No matter who watches or who doesn't, I'm very grateful to still be able to give my thoughts and my commentary on a show that I really, really do enjoy. So, as always, please feel free to drop down below and let me know your thoughts on this episode and my recap in general. So, once again, this is D, Movieman, signing off, and I'll see you at the movie.